everyone. My name is Jen Rainey, and I'm the Community Relations Coordinator with the Delaware Children's Department, and we are back again with another conversation around mental health for Mental Health Month, and I'm excited to talk about this topic today. It is around human trafficking and the impact human trafficking has on our young people. And I have two experts with me. Both are part of the Human Trafficking Interagency Coordinating Council in our state, and they both bring a wealth of knowledge and expertise to this topic. Abby Rogers is the Director of the Delaware Department of Justice's Family Division, and Kara Sawyer is the Deputy Director of the Delaware Division of Substance Abuse and Mental Health. Thank you both so much for joining me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Awesome. So just to jump right in, Kara, I was hoping you could first talk to us about what is human trafficking?
Human trafficking, as we know it, is basically modern day slavery. We tend to think of it as two different types, sex trafficking and labor trafficking. So sex trafficking is what you think of where folks are being induced by another individual, either by fraud or force or coercion to sell sex to somebody else. So that includes brothels, escort services, pornography, oftentimes illicit massage businesses that we'll see, and other outdoor solicitations. Labor trafficking is the crime of also using force, fraud, or coercion, but that induces a person to work or provide services. And those are often seen in the fields of agriculture, domestic work, restaurants, cleaning services, and often in like carnivals and that type of thing.
Wow. And can you talk a little bit about, what human trafficking's impact is on a child and, how a child might be, involved in a situation like this?
So children are naturally more naive and trusting of people. So often because they depend on others and they kind of have that undeveloped ability to really analyze decisions that they're making, they're really a perfect target for a trafficker. So they don't always understand the consequences of getting involved in this type of thing, and they may not even know what they're getting themselves into in the beginning, which is typically the case. Often a trafficker will use some grooming techniques similar to what you'd see in any type of child abuse relationship. And then the relationship becomes very complicated because they often develop a relationship, so they care about the person who has trafficked them. So it makes it even more difficult to kind of get out of that web of lifestyle. And then another thing that is upsetting and leads to someone not getting out of this lifestyle is that often the children or the trafficked are forced to do certain things that could be deemed criminal, and so they're hesitant to go forward because they're afraid of getting in trouble themselves. So that is something that we've been working on hard in Delaware, and Abby can probably talk about that a little bit, about some of the legislation that's been passed in the past few years to help that.
Yeah, I think I just want to follow up on the idea of what human trafficking is, because I think before I got involved in this work back in 2013, I really believed that trafficking was something that happened in other countries. Much like the movie Taken with Liam Neeson. Mm-hmm. And I certainly did not think that we had trafficking here in our state of Delaware. And I think at the end of the day, it's always critically important to in my mind, think of it as exploitation of other people. Because trafficking conjures something in our mind where exploitation is really just the modern day slavery piece. And to that end, the people that we see are the most vulnerable people who are subjected to this, like Kara said. And the trafficker always knows that individual is vulnerable for some reason and has the ability to figure out what that kiddo needs or wants to make them feel secure with them and to build that trust. So what we see a lot of times, like Kara said, is they do commit crimes in the course of this activity. And what we've done in the state of Delaware and are always striving to improve on is to make sure that we have the ability to have people, if they have been convicted of crimes relating to trafficking, to ultimately, as a victim, to ultimately apply to have their records expunged and to clear up their record for the activities that they did while they were a victim and in the course of being a victim of human trafficking.
Wow, it is just such a long-standing process with so many collateral consequences. Do you think, could you both kind of talk about just kind of the mental health impact? I know you both kind of alluded to, the relationship and just different factors that go along with it. Can you kind of talk about what impact this has on a child?
Sure. So as I described before, like that relationship that a child who's trafficked ends up having with the trafficker can really lead to very complex trauma. So you're trying to unpack that all the time, really, when someone finally comes forward. And it can also lead to, oftentimes we see substance use disorders, and often drugs or alcohol are used as part of the relationship and part of the gaining of trust and vulnerability of the child in the first place. So oftentimes, they will have mental health issues that will need to be addressed because of trauma, frankly. And perhaps they had mental health issues before the trafficking occurred that were part of the vulnerabilities that were preyed upon by the trafficker.
Yeah, I think very often kids are coming from a terrible place to start with. So they already are in serious need. And then this adds to it. And one of the things that we see from an investigative prosecutorial standpoint is many of these people do not identify as victims. So it is very, very hard to help them build their life back up one step at a time if they don't identify as a victim in this relationship. So that's one of the big challenges in getting people help.
Right. And so since they don't identify as victims, often the place to start is with the mental health or the substance use disorder. And then if we have trauma-informed assistance in the state, which we do, then that will sort of start to kind of come out as the process is happening. And if they're getting the help that they need, eventually they are able to restart their lives, whether or not they finally give themselves that label of a victim or a survivor.
Wow. That healing process it's just so complex. Where do you suggest, someone start, or even, someone in maybe a person's life, maybe helping guide them on this journey? Where should someone begin to even heal from this?
Well, there is a national hotline for trafficking, and it is 1-888-373-7888. And then you can also text BeFree, that's BeFree, to 233-733. So those are places that someone could start to get resources, and they would connect you to a local resource. We also have some resources here in Delaware. Child Inc. Is a great resource. They have groups and other mental health counselors who are able to help individuals. Also Zoe Ministries, which is a group of folks who are dedicated solely to the issue of human trafficking. And SOAR, which is Survivors of Abuse and Recovery, which offer trauma-focused therapies to help folks who are recovering. And also, it's most important to know that if you think that a child has been trafficked, or you have some suspicions, the most important thing is to call the DFS hotline. That's probably your first stop. So that would be the place where you could be connected to law enforcement and others who can help.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. Do you think we've, come a long way, like you both mentioned, kind of, breaking the stigma around human trafficking and, thinking, this doesn't happen here? Where do you think we are in kind of raising the awareness and making sure people know, the risks and where to find help?
I'll speak to that because I feel like in 2013, no one was talking about it in the state of Delaware. And largely just because no one knew what it really looked like. And from our end, investigations are very long and complicated. So at state level, it just wasn't happening. I think we have come so far in the last, how many ever years that is, 6 years. And I'm amazed at the conversations that have been happening, and not just conversations, but actual real work. And I'll let Kara talk about some of the great things that the council's doing. But we have really gotten the conversation going and now given people resources and places to start educating themselves. We have done much better job of tracking, long way to go because we still don't accurately capture the number of cases, but that we now can see what our needs are in the state of Delaware to be responsive to the problem that we have here and start making sure that we're building that resource for everyone.
Absolutely.
Yes, and just to talk a little bit further about that, I think that putting that label has been, is powerful, like calling this human trafficking instead of, oh, a girl who ran away and then ended up with the wrong crowd, because that was kind of what we called it before. But there is a real name and a real power that has been taken from this person because of what has happened. Also, the state of Delaware has done such a great job in responding. I would compliment Abby's office in a lot of prosecutions, especially just this year. There's been really a lot of effort made in that area, and it's great because then it becomes an awareness thing. It's not necessarily turning people who would do this kind of thing away, but it's letting people know that this is happening in their world and in their state and in their neighborhood, and they need to be aware and what they can do to prevent it.
Absolutely. It's so important to keep that awareness going and outreach and make sure people feel connected and that they're able to get help when they need it. I was curious if you both could talk a little bit about, what can be done on the front end to, reduce the risks of human trafficking and helping maybe connect kids to, different services or different, basically just different outlets to help them.
So the Human Trafficking Interagency Coordinating Council, which we call HTIC for short because that's a crazy long name. We have been, since the quarantine sort of stay-at-home order has come down, we have started doing some parent cyber safety workshops, so via Zoom, so people can join every Wednesday and Saturday, most Wednesdays and Saturday evenings, just to become empowered about what their kids are doing online, because often that's where this type of thing can happen, so that if parents are aware of what they can do to kind of control their children's access to or other people's access to their children, then that really adds a layer of empowerment, I think, for parents. And then they can talk to their children about it in a way that makes sense to their child. There's also a lot of really good things happening at the school level, in the school, in the health curriculums. There is a new exciting curriculum that's coming on board in some school districts next year that's going to be helpful to teach kids about human trafficking and prevention, and just really starting at that low level of kids in school and kind of having a name, again, naming what it is and talking about it. That's one of the really good things that's happening.
Definitely, that's awesome.
Yeah, I think as a community, any of these crimes against kids don't happen if we don't have vulnerable kids. So at a very basic level, we need to keep kids safe, give them resilience, and build stronger families, whatever that family looks like. But they need to have a safe, secure space. And especially in times like this in a pandemic, one might not think that it is happening right now, but it most certainly is, because families are incredibly vulnerable because of losing jobs, losing family members, losing homes. So it is a very, very scary time for kids right now. And I think as a community, we really owe a duty to our kids to think about how we can prevent vulnerable kids in the first place. And Kara mentioned some of the things, and I love the organization Prevent Child Abuse Delaware, which really helps you try to figure out how we can be proactive rather than reactive. And the Bo Biden Foundation also has a ton of great resources to be on the front end of this so that we aren't having this conversation about kids on down the line.
Absolutely. And those two organizations, I know for a fact, will go into schools and provide, free resources if you want them to. So just takes, a parent kind of asking the school if they could do that. And it can be really, really effective. I know my children have received the PCAD, or the Prevent Child Abuse Delaware training, and they found it very, very good because they came home talking about it, about what they learned, and isn't this interesting? So absolutely, there are organizations who are really dedicated to helping kids feel safe and knowing how they can, who they can go to trust.
And people right now, even in the quarantine, can hop online and look at any of those organizations and get information about what they can do to help children and to help prepare. And I think importantly, the National Human Trafficking Hotline is run by an organization called Polaris. And if you go to Polaris' website, they have so many wonderful resources for whatever you are, a parent, a teacher, a frontline healthcare worker, you name it. They have great resources there to help you figure out how you can spot these signs, what you should do if you see the signs in your particular industry or your niche.
That's awesome. There's really such a big network, virtually and, just around the country, and here in Delaware, it's so important. I guess in closing, I was wondering if you both could talk about just some of the main takeaways from today. What are some of the signs people should take note of? How could they help someone heal? Anything you think that would be good for people to keep in mind?
I think to just be aware of your children who are in your life, either your own children or people that you're close with. If you notice changes in their mood or changes in their ability to spend money, often is a red flag. Just pay attention if they become moodier or they don't want to share with you things that they are up to. And that sounds a bit like, teenage behavior, but just tune in a little bit. And if you do suspect something, there are resources online that can help you have that conversation. But most importantly is to make a call. So the National Hotline is a resource. Child Inc. also runs a hotline for runaway and homeless youth that could also be a resource for kids who are feeling vulnerable or are being swayed one way or the other, but also for parents. And that number is 302-762-6110. So just to, always be tuning in and notice those little changes in behavior that could mean something deeper.
Absolutely.
I always just tell people the very technical idea of listen to your spidey sense. If you see something going on with a kid or with a family or with a relationship that just makes you feel like things aren't right, I think that's the time you need to start asking some additional questions and maybe making a call to DFS hotline.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I love that. That's great advice. Cool. Well, thank you all so much for speaking with me. I really, really appreciate it. And thank you all for tuning in. We'll be back with another discussion soon, and I hope you stay well and stay safe. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you.